Hello, Julie. Great to have you. How are you? It's been a long
Hi,
time. Happy New
Gustavo.
Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. So, a lot of people probably know you, but probably some people know that are new to the community. What do you do? What do you like to do? Where do you live, etc.?
I live in close to Toronto in Canada, but I have lived on different continents in different cities. And I don't think I ever told you before, I lived in Illinois for a while too. Um, that's never
So,
come
I
up
guess you love
before.
the
So
snow, right? You love the snow for sure, and the cold. No?
I actually moved from Ottawa to Chicago. And when Chicago was shut down with snow, we were not impressed. We were like, oh, well, this is just winter. No, I love it. I love actually warm places. It just hasn't taken that path in my life that's where I live permanently. So we'll see what's next.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about the type of work that you do.
I have a very eclectic background, you might say. For me, it perfectly makes sense how one thing followed on the other. And I use all of it. So that's interesting. I come from the arts. I did a business degree first, then I did a theater degree. That was my first master's. Then I moved to North America. I got married. And my son was in kindergarten. I was looking at what's next, realizing I can have another full career and didn't want to go back to what I had done before. Tried some computer programming as well. And well, funnily enough, I have an aptitude for it. I realized that's not how I want to spend my days. Did a degree as a librarian and worked as a librarian and slowly worked my way towards just really change management. I did a coach training, professional coach training with Adler in Toronto. Anybody looking for high quality coach training, check it out. Ask me about it if you want. And more, I could just see that what we need in change management is really the people management aspect of it, because change doesn't need to be painful. It's often not successful because there's resistance to it. Sometimes it's also just a bad idea, but mostly it's good ideas for change management, how something can be improved, and then why doesn't this stick? And that's where coaching comes in, where improv comes in. I've done theater improv with frontline service teams. Really enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun for people to build a mindset. And I guess that's my main working area, mindset and growth mindset. And how do you take that from an exercise into a lived experience?
Amazing. And what's your facilitation superpower when you're leading teams and organizations through change? How do you deal with that? What's your approach?
I'm actually very pragmatic. And I think sort of when it comes to superpower, as in what is the unique that I bring to it, that not everybody brings to it, I would say it's a combination of facilitating, really going deep in conversations and in group work, and then tying it back to practical steps and what does that mean for our daily operation, right? Because these are not two pieces that often they do stay separate, but really when we can bring those together is, I think, when we can have the most impact on our own life and in our work life and our environment.
Amazing. I think that the quality of the conversations define the quality of a company culture, right? So what are the obstacles when it comes to having people talk about the issues, what's working, what's not working, what's getting in the way? How do you do it? Any tip, any trick that you want to share with the audience?
Well, based on my background, I think if more people can take a coaching mindset, more questions being asked, because you really want to know, you really want to find out what somebody else's answer to this question is, right? That can then take us into better conversations. So this goes back to the first management book I ever read, The 7 Habits, like almost 25 or so years ago. The first Seek to Understand, right? So really promoting and nurturing, and certainly in a workshop or a session, to really model and call it out, to have a conversation where when you ask a question, you then actually fully listen to the answer.
And in that regards, I mean, because you can facilitate through thoughtful questions and listening and providing everything from a coach perspective, but what happens if the team work in a company or the team itself that it's not safe? How do you create that psychological safety as a facilitator to make sure that people are willing to share with you what you're asking?
Yeah, well, and that gets very interesting for us coming in as an outside facilitator, right? Because the people in the room, for them, this is not an isolated event to communicate with each other. So as they either have that psychological safety in place or not, and that's where it starts. And if they don't, questions you ask won't suddenly provide that, right? So then it's a question of working maybe in small groups, designing exercises in a way that you can slowly build up to, here are the real answers for these questions. Here are the real contributions to that. And certainly a recommendation to generally make it a focal point to work on psychological safety in the service of the work that needs to get done, right?
Absolutely. And how do you deal with uncoachable leaders? You know, you talk about the power of adopting a growth mindset, a coach mindset, but then sometimes leaders are not wired or they are not open and they want to. So how do you deal with uncoachable leaders?
That's a very interesting question. I think foremost is sort of a caring honesty, right? And just highlight. So by not being open to hear what others have to say, here's what you're losing. And there are hard losses there. It's not about a touchy-feely, oh, we don't have a fuzzy, warm environment at work. It's about you are actually not innovating. You don't get the feedback about what is actually broken and needs fixing. And there are some sort of hard business reality losses that come with that mindset, with that closed-mindedness, right? And then those numbers hopefully change it. I mean, if somebody really isn't coachable, well, they will hit a point where life is so painful that they will open up, chances are, right? Maybe some people can go through life without being coachable, but I haven't met anybody yet for whom that is true.
Or is it that you just throw people into the abyss and then the abyss and then they have to figure it out? In what role?
One thing I think that's really important is to not be afraid, but to understand as a facilitator or consultant that I've been brought in to point these things out, right? And if it means my contract gets terminated, that's okay. There's enough work to go around. But somebody and often that's the beauty of bringing in a consultant for a company, that that person isn't in a reporting relationship and can say these things without risking their livelihood in the same way as an employee might feel, right? But I really think that that's part of the gig, that I'm there to point things out that are uncomfortable to say, perhaps, and then to find a way, though, of saying it that the chances that the person can hear me or the team can hear me is really high, right? I'm really interested in neuroscience and the brain and how it works. And there is that part of the conversation, if people feel threatened and they just go into fight or flight mode, versus having the conversation in a way that people can respond from their frontal lobe area and can actually process what is being said and then respond. So not just react, but respond in a thoughtful way. And there are ways on how to create an atmosphere that it is far more likely that people will engage in that frontal lobe area.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask you, do you have any story? I mean, people love stories, no? An example of a team that was maybe stuck and then you did something and all of a sudden people got to start talking about the issues that they didn't want to. Any story about a transformation or something magical that happened in the room that you want to share? You're smiling. I know that's probably somewhere.
Yeah.
You
Like,
cannot share
I'm
all,
sure
but
that, I'm sure
exactly.
there are.
Let me rephrase,
I think,
a story that you can share.
yeah. I think the stinky fish has been very interesting for that. So the stinky fish canvas on the Fearless website available. Sort of moving from there to how to resolve one of the stinky fish issues, and how people tend to be very cautious and to just go with the low-hanging fruit. People that, yes, and you can talk about this, and you still live to tell the tale. I don't have a concrete, oh, here's what happened, this and this, that comes to mind right now. I feel like a bit, I see the forest, but I can't name a tree.
I get it. But I like the idea of the low-hanging fruit, because sometimes, and this is connecting culture transformation and change management, sometimes we're looking for that thing that's going to change the company like dramatically. And to your point, sometimes it's better to get started with what's the low-hanging fruit and build momentum as a way to get people, oh, change is possible, right?
Yeah. Well, and change is possible, and also change can be safe and change can be enjoyed, right? Who wants to eat the same meal every single day? Let's change it up. Let's try something different. A recipe we haven't used before. Actually, that brings me to, I think metaphors are really helpful. And so one of the things I find I've had great success with is when you sort of pick up the little things, where somebody just mentions they like flying planes on the weekends or something like that. And then taking the concept from the abstract into the practical, not just to the direct work. And then, of course, also being in as a consultant, I might not be the expert on the field the team is working in. Mm-hmm. But I can pick up on saying, okay, so this plane doesn't lift off from the ground the way it is right now, right? Herbert, I heard you speak about flying planes on the weekends and how much you enjoy that. So when it doesn't work, it doesn't lift off, what do? We have to diagnose and find what isn't working, right? Or cooking or recipe metaphors are often a go-to for me, because there's enough people usually in a group who are interested in that, and everybody likes to eat. So that's often a way to bring those abstract concepts home and make them relevant for what you do a little bit more.
Indeed, I love metaphors. I mean, on one hand, it's easier to talk about the things that we don't want to because it feels like that it's not personal. But on the other hand, metaphors invite us to dream. So you can use that metaphor to, okay, what kind of world do we want to build together? And in that regards, talking about metaphors and dreams, if you're dealing with a leader, let's say a leader of a company or a team reaches out and they want to start evolving the company culture, what would be your advice? Where should they get started? What's the first step that you recommend them to take?
The diagnosis of where we are is really important, right? And it's not only the work of saying this is it, it's also the work of mapping the culture first. Gives us a shared vocabulary now of what we are talking about, right? Because if you have like one person going off and doing that change management training, they come back and they've learned a new vocabulary, but it needs to be shared so that you can have a conversation that everybody can move forward with. And well, as you know, I really like the canvas for the mapping. I've done a few sessions this year actually where I started with just doing the center part, the heart, the purpose, values, priorities, and behaviors, because for teams that are not used to these conversations, that's often enough to just sort of do that for a half day and then settle down with it and have some homework before we go then into the side panels. And the feedback I usually get is that now they are having the conversations they didn't have before, and that make them feel more engaged with work, and that make them look at things a little bit differently. So I'd say the first starting point would be let's get a first session done just to map and see where that goes and where we can take it from there, right? That first diagnosis of why this engine isn't taking off.
Fantastic. I love the idea, like culture is like a shared vocabulary or language, right? And if we don't start from there, how we talk about things, then it's harder to talk about the future. And so to wrap it up, talking about shared things, what are the shared interests that people can reach out to you? People call culture designers or change managers that want to talk to you and get to know what are the topics that they can, what do you like to talk about with other people and network around? Besides snow and cold weather.
Yeah. Oh, wow, how to narrow that down. I really love collaborating and working on something with people together. I'm perfectly fine being a sounding board. Somebody is like, here's this idea that's rolling around in my head, and I need somebody to just ask the question to make sure it sounds, right? I really enjoy doing that kind of thing. One of my coaching clients has called me the mini think tank, what I provide, right? Because I'd really like to see where else we can take the culture design and how we can make it explode all over the world.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for your time, Julie. I mean, I always learn new things about you. So hopefully people are going to learn a lot of things about you and reach out and continue the conversation. So it was a pleasure hosting you, and let's stay in touch. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.